So I want you to take a quick test for me. When your partner's quiet, do you assume that they're upset with you? Or do you replay criticisms in your head for days when they're not around? Do you hold back your true thoughts, scared that your partner is going to leave or is going to explode and walk out on you just for the fact that you shared them? If so, then you might be struggling with fear of rejection. This is also known as rejection-sensitive dysphoria. And if left unchecked, this can ruin your relationship completely. So this fear of rejection, this hypersensitivity to rejection doesn't just hurt, it often creates the very outcomes that you're trying to avoid. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the common mistakes people make when trying to tackle this fear of rejection, why willpower alone isn't enough, and I'm going to introduce a 3-step process to create lasting change. So when we struggle with a fear of rejection, this isn't just simply a battle within our own mind. This is actually a disaster waiting to happen in your relationship. Rejection sensitivity, fear of rejection, RSD, whatever you want to call it, this actively disrupts communication. It causes emotional disconnection, damages trust between you and your partner. It creates patterns of misinterpretation and overreaction that leave both people feeling confused and distant. And it turns your biggest fear into reality. So what is RSD? Well, rejection-sensitive dysphoria can be quite common in ADHD, but it's not exclusive to ADHD. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria is this feeling of complete despair when you are rejected, when you are invalidated, when you feel that you are not welcome within somebody else's life. The problem is that this fear of rejection doesn't mean that it is actual rejection. Oftentimes, this negative feeling can come from simply perceived rejection, this idea that we feel rejected rather than actual rejection. And this fear of being rejected means that we can develop some really ineffective habits that have a massive impact on all of our relationships. I'm going to break this down one by one. The first thing is obviously communication. Communication is the foundation of any strong relationship, but RSD complicates this process. People who do struggle with RSD can misread neutral signals. So a quiet response or lack of enthusiasm can be perceived as personal rejection, as a rejection of your ideas, of yourself, of you as a person. So for example, let's say your partner sends a short text just saying okay or K. Instead of you seeing it as a neutral reply, you might interpret it as a sign that they're upset or disappointed in you. Over a long period of time, this misinterpretation doesn't just cause internal turmoil, it triggers a domino effect in your interactions. Anger, sadness, or panic can take over, and it can lead to emotional reactions that feel disproportionate to the situation. And these internal reactions spill over into your behavior, and this creates unnecessary conflict and tension. Imagine this as an example. Your partner comes home from work, sits down, and doesn't start talking to you. They're sat there in silence. With RSD, you can assume that they're upset with you, that you've done something wrong. So instead of giving them space to decompress, to come to terms with their own feelings, to just get some mental space, you might pull away emotionally. You might start talking to them sharply, prepared for them to reject you because you're convinced something is wrong. Or worse, you might just simply confront them in frustration, asking them, well, what did I do now? What are you upset with me about now? This kind of reaction creates tension that doesn't need to exist. And over time, these small moments pile up, planting seed after seed of doubt that grows into huge walls between you and your partner. People with RSD or fear of rejection often have intense emotional responses to perceived rejection, which can take different forms. Anger is one of the most common. It's sudden, explosive, and can leave your partner feeling attacked for no reason. Or you may respond with sadness, withdrawal, shutting down emotionally to protect yourself. This is an avoidance of vulnerability. It creates a lot of barriers to open communication because you've got your shields up. So for example, you may avoid bringing up important issues that you think is going to maintain peace, but it only allows this resentment to build. And over time, unresolved issues create distance, and it makes it much more difficult to reconnect with each other. But this fear of rejection can also encourage maladaptive coping strategies that worsen the dynamics between you and your partner. So for example, people pleasing. Oftentimes people who fear rejection can become people pleasers. This can become a survival tool. So you end up sacrificing your own needs or mask your true feelings in order to avoid conflict, to avoid this rejection. So on the surface, it seems like you're protecting the relationship, but in reality, this constant suppression erodes your authenticity. Your partner ends up feeling disconnected from who you really are, and trust starts to falter. If you think about it, after all, how can they trust your words or your feelings if you're always holding them back, if you're always pretending that they don't exist, right? What often happens is that by holding in these emotions, this starts to turn from sadness or feeling sorry for yourself to resentment, to blaming your partner for a dynamic that you are cultivating. And then this can turn into maybe making passive aggressive comments or withdrawing emotionally. This escalates and becomes a negative feedback loop. So by avoiding what felt like a risky conversation, you end up creating a bigger problem, one that damages the relationship more than the original issue. And ultimately, the result is that you end up creating emotional disconnection and long-term mistrust. Your partner can feel like they're walking on eggshells, unsure of whether they'll trigger some sort of overreaction. Or you may feel shut out because you avoid vulnerable conversations. So over time, both partners feel a distance growing, but neither knows how to break this cycle. So these patterns aren't rooted in your partner's actions. They stem from your internalized fears and your ineffective coping mechanisms. Now, this doesn't make you weak or unlovable. It means that you've learned tools that may have worked temporarily, but these are ineffective tools to handle rejection. The thing is that willpower alone won't stop you from misinterpreting a neutral look or silence as rejection. It won't stop your body from reacting with a racing heart or a tight chest. And it won't repair damage caused by spiraling reactions. The solution lies in rewiring how your mind processes rejection. So it's not about pretending that you don't feel hurt. It's about learning to control those feelings so that they don't control your relationship. So the first thing is, why don't traditional methods work? Why doesn't, the usual gut instinct of dealing with this help us deal with rejection sensitivity? Well, suppressing emotions seems like the easiest solution, but it creates internal pressure. So when you pretend that you don't feel the way you feel, these feelings bottle up. And eventually, if you bottle anything up and keep on forcing it downwards, eventually it's going to explode, often as an overreaction or some sort of emotional shutdown. But just relying on willpower alone is also not going to help you. Rejection sensitivity's intensity makes it impossible to simply push through. Ignoring your emotions doesn't make them disappear, it amplifies them. So these methods fail because they don't address the early signs of emotional spirals. And that's where this 3-step process is different. It intercepts the cycle early and it rewires your response. So the first step is recognizing your triggers as they arise. So triggers often show up as physical sensations tied to overwhelming emotions. So for instance, you text your partner and their reply is unusually short. Your chest tightens, your mind races with thoughts like, are they upset with me? Have I done something wrong? Maybe they want to break up with me. Paying attention to these physical and emotional cues are early warnings that your brain is interpreting the situation as rejection. So by identifying these signs, you create a moment of awareness, a moment where you can look at yourself and a chance to stop the spiral before it starts to take over. Without this awareness, you're kind of left reacting blindly, which is when you end up misunderstanding what your partner is doing. You're misunderstanding, misinterpreting their actions, and ultimately where conflict starts to occur. Step 2 is to pause. So this step is really powerful because it creates a space between the trigger and your reaction. So if you think of it as kind of hitting the pause button on your emotions, even a few seconds can make a massive difference. So for example, you might count to 10 or take 3 deep breaths. Getting into this habit of pausing before you respond to anything is going to be a crucial skill to have, especially if you deal with any sort of emotional intensity or fear of rejection. If the situation feels more intense, you might need a longer pause, like stepping away for half an hour or even a day before you respond in the way that you would normally respond. And during this time, use what we call the detective approach. This is where you can imagine you're a detective, piecing together clues from your emotional reaction. Ask yourself questions like, what's the evidence that I'm being rejected? Am I making assumptions about their behavior? Could there be other explanations for their behavior? Is this really about me, or is it about them and their situation? This process helps you challenge the story that your emotional brain is creating and start to respond with more logic instead of impulse. And step 3 is reframing your thoughts by shifting your perspective. So this isn't about forcing yourself to think positively. It's about looking at the situation realistically and training your brain to see rejection as less threatening. So for example, if you're trying to repair a relationship with an ex-partner, they cancel their plans last minute. Instead of assuming that they don't want to repair the relationship, or that they hate you, or they're seeing someone else, consider the many other possibilities. They might have a lot on their plate at the moment. They clearly have a life outside of the relationship. They may be overwhelmed dealing with an emergency. They may have family situations. There are many, many other explanations as to why your partner or ex-partner has cancelled this dinner. Over time, learning to reframe reduces this emotional intensity of rejection, and it helps you to respond in much healthier ways. So this process doesn't just prevent blowups, it builds emotional stability and trust within yourself, but also with your partner as well. When you consistently recognize triggers, you pause and you reframe, your partner starts to feel safer and more connected. And that trust strengthens your bond and creates a foundation for a healthier relationship. A lot of my successful members have learned a very, very similar technique in order to help them start to reframe their situation. And this reframing helps them to not just emotionally regulate, but also to be able to lean into difficult situations, rebuilding the emotional safety with their partner and being able to grow the relationship back and repair the relationship back in a very, very powerful way. And this is one of the most powerful techniques that you can learn to build yourself back up, build your self-confidence, and be able to move forward very powerfully and lead a relationship in the right way. And if you do want to join the members and I, then join my Relationship Bootcamp, where you'll learn the same steps and tools that all of my members start with to start rebuilding, repairing, and reconciling their relationships from the ground up. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to grab your spot. So rewiring these patterns does take time, it does take practice, but the payoff is really worth it. You start to gain control over your emotions and how you show up in your relationship. This fear of rejection no longer dictates your action. It doesn't impact how needy you are or how angry you are in your relationship. And instead, you end up facing it with confidence and you create a stronger, much more resilient connection within the relationship. And that in itself rebuilds attraction between you and your partner. Because when your partner feels safe around you in conversations, then that's where the relationship starts to build back stronger. And this is part of a larger tool set. This is all about learning not only how to manage your emotions, but being able to turn these emotions into the fuel that moves you forward in the relationship, in your life, is going to be one of the most powerful tools that you can learn. I've actually done a deeper dive video on this, which I'll link to on the screen. Ultimately, we want to learn not just to manage our emotions. We want to learn how to use these emotions to be able to lean into difficult situations, to be able to build resilience and anti-fragility, so that we're not avoiding difficult situations. We're actually using them as the fuel to rebuild the connection within our relationships. It's a really powerful concept, and it's something that I think you're going to find really useful. So I'm going to leave you with that deep dive video, and I'll see you over there.